Now let's talk about sinusoidal graphs. Now we've already covered how to make a basic graph, but here let's make some transformations to the graph so you can better understand the four concepts here. We have the shifts and the periods, midlines, amplitudes, and these are the various ways how a sine graph can change. Now A stands for amplitude, which is how much the height of the wave, which is our graph, is. So kind of the vertical stretch. The longer the amplitude is, the more vertical stretch it has. The B is our period, which is it's kind of how long the graph is. And the standard graph is 2 pi, which is also known as 360 degrees. And the B, we can find it in a basic equation by taking 2 pi, which is our circumference kind of, 2 pi divided by B. So I'll write that right here. It should be 2 pi divided by B as our period. That's our formula. And for the phase shift kind of moves it like how it sounds, left or right. And to find the phase shift, you have to take into account to B, and you do C divided by B, and then the phase shift would be the opposite, like the negative. So if this was positive C, the phase shift would move left, kind of like in a parabola. So the formula for this would be negative C over B. And the midline is moving it up or down. The midline is this solid line in the graph, like you've seen before, and it moves the graph up or down. So if the midline was, let's say, +2, that means the graph would be right here. And normally the midline is just +0, so it's always sitting on the x-axis. Now let's get started with this one, y equals sine 2x. Now the first thing we need to find out is this, which is our period from our formula, and you can see that there is no c, which means there's no phase shift, which means it should be at a length of right here. So let's find out what is the period. So we'd have to divide this, 2 pi divided by 2. So 2 pi divided by 2, and what is that? That would be pi, which means the length of our sinusoidal graph would be from here to here. So as you know from before, we have 3 key points: the beginning, end, and middle. And we also have the middle of the beginning and the middle, and the middle of the middle and the end. So since we know that this is positive, we know that the basic shape of the graph should look like this. And we know that the middle of the beginning and the middle is 1 step up, and middle and ends middle is 1 step down. So now we can just graph it. And it just looks a tad skinnier from the actual one. Alright, that's our basic shape, and as you can see, the other two have the same period. So this will be our basic shape for the next 2 problems. So I'm going to go faster on these, but I will show you in a different color. So B will be blue and A is red. Now, what's different here? Now you can see that now there's a phase shift, which means that the sinusoidal graph moves to the left because it's positive. Now, we can't just say it moves to negative pi because we have to take into account to the period. So let's use this formula, which would be negative c, which is pi, negative pi over 2. So that would be our phase shift, which is actually half the distance we would go to. And now this, what does this mean? It's the midline, right? So we would move this all the way to -3 down here. So let's start plotting the beginning, middle, and end. So our beginning would be right here at negative pi over 2. Our end would be at positive pi over 2 because you shift this and right here. And everything else looks the same. So we have our basic look, just shifted down 3 and moved to the left by pi over 2. Now for the last one, I'll do it in orange. And here you can see that there's more elements to it. Now we have a negative sign, which just flips it, and we have different inputs. So let's solve this now. We know automatically that the midline tells us that the sinusoidal graph will be sitting somewhere here. And it's also upside down. So we know the phase shift is negative 3 over 2 pi. So that would be our phase shift. And what we have to do is just move this. This is basically 1 pi plus 1.5, which is right here. And don't forget that the phase shift moves it up too. So we would be up here, beginning, middle, end. And the graph is flipped, so points right here, and you have your graph. And that is how you do the basic transformations of a sinusoidal graph.